At the top of these stairs is some of the greatest treasure ever found on English soil. More than 1,000 years old, some call it page 1 of British history. It is the Sutton Hoo treasure, with this helmet at its centre. That the helmet was ever discovered at all was down to the efforts of one woman, Mrs. Edith Pretty.
Mrs. Pretty was interested in spiritualism, like a lot of people were in the 1930s. And there is a story that either her or a friend of hers had visions of soldiers with spears walking around on the mounds, which she could see from her first floor window.
Whatever the truth of these rumours, these earthen mounds were certainly intriguing.
I think Mrs. Pretty was just curious about what was in the mounds on her estate. She'd been to Egypt, and also there always are, rumours of gold in the mounds. But she did know a bit about archaeology.
Mrs. Pretty contacted Ipswich Museum, and they in turn suggested an archaeologist named Basil Brown.
He literally rolled up at her door one day and presented himself, and that's how it all began.
Basil Brown had a real passion for investigating monuments. Assisted by Mrs. Pretty's gardener and gamekeeper, Brown carried out the delicate task of excavating the site. Just a few weeks of painstaking work on Mound 1 revealed the impression of a ship which had long since rotted away.
The boat simply got bigger and bigger and bigger. This is as big as the Scandinavian ships, So he was very aware, I think, during the excavation of the ship, that he was into something very, very special.
It came like a bolt out of the blue. Suddenly, here's a window on a world. This barbaric, splendid burial overflowing with extraordinary treasures.
Weapons, gold and garnet jewellery, and of course containers, quite a lot of containers, imported silver, drinking horns, drinking vessels, everything. Shoes, buckles. If you could put together a kind of life for an Anglo-Saxon king, there's not much there that you would actually want to add to it.
On the 28th of July 1939, the team made perhaps the most momentous discovery of all: the rusted pieces of an iron helmet. These pieces have been painstakingly put back together to form this terrifying helmet. Although it is made of iron, it was once covered in tinned bronze panels. This replica helmet shows how it would have glittered in battle. It was highly decorated, with scenes of a horseman riding over a fallen soldier, and these dancing warriors with their spears and semicircular headdresses. The face mask has human features: a cast bronze mouth, nose, and eyebrows. Look closer still, and you will see that each eyebrow ends in a boar's head with pointed tusks, and at each end of the crest there is a dragon head with sharp little teeth.
The degree of detail in that face mask, the garnets that pick out the eyebrows, the little sort of toothbrush moustache over the mouth, all this stuff is quite extraordinary. It's almost as though they are trying to present a portrait of the man who is behind it. And of course it is extraordinary that when you actually wear the helmet, or wear the replica, it also actually enhances your voice. It actually makes the voice echo and drop in tone, so that too would actually give the wearer some extra sort of persona, if you like.
An English helmet may be, but one crowded with images taken from Scandinavian mythology, like these dancing warrior panels. Each warrior is dragging a foot and holds spears and a short sword.
They seem to be doing some kind of ritual movement. Of course, they could be fighting, but we do have parallels for that in Scandinavia. So this is obviously a motif.
There was one other group of mighty warriors who influenced this helmet. The Romans had left Britain at the beginning of the 5th century, but their influence was still being felt a century or two later. This fallen warrior design, where the man on horseback is riding over the conquered enemy, has its roots in the Roman period, and the helmet shape itself borrows heavily from Roman parade helmets.
These early Anglo-Saxon kingdoms are really interesting because, as far as we can tell, they were just successful warriors who established their dynasties in Britain, having migrated from Scandinavia in the late Roman period. Of course, later on, when they became powerful, these kings like Offa in Mercia, who built the great dike between England and Wales, or these people in East Anglia, they like to claim that they had a great descent going back even to kings before. They come from the pagan world of Odin and Thor, Woden and Freya, and these pagan gods of war and storm in the Viking northern world that we're familiar with later, you know. But they also adopt Roman ideas of rulership, of kingship perhaps, some of the symbolism of their kingship, and subsequently, of course, Roman religion and Latin culture.
The discovery of the Sutton Hoo treasure turned Anglo-Saxon scholarship on its head, bringing with it a new understanding of how sophisticated their culture was.
Just by looking at this grave assemblage, we realised that there were international connections, that goods and probably also people could travel very long distances and very far beyond their own cultures. If you look at the eyebrows, the garnets used on those may have come from as far away as India or Sri Lanka. So you see that the materials themselves had travelled quite a long distance before reaching Anglo-Saxon England.
I think the helmet has become an icon. That helmet has a sort of reality for people because they can look at it and see the early 7th century, see those early Anglo-Saxon warriors and how they perceived themselves.
Nearly 1,500 years after it was made, the Sutton Hoo helmet has taken its place in the British Museum as one of its supreme treasures. Discovered on the eve of war, it became a symbol of the nation and proof of a forgotten, sophisticated civilization. It's an object in the museum's collections like no other. We may never know who made it, and we can't be certain who wore it, but it still has the power to make us think again about our nation.